Guys, I'm thrilled to have Nate with us today, and I'm sure you guys will find this episode highly insightful. Hello, Nate. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Okay, it's awesome, awesome. So, can you give us a little bit of a background as to what Step Manager is all about?
Sure, absolutely. It's in short, it's designed for people that are ready for the next step in their career and they're not exactly sure how to get there. So I founded it back in 2016 after I did a study at a an organization that hired me and a group of others to study the relationship between line managers and individual contributors and understand why some people were sticking around and why other people were leaving. And through that process, we discovered that a lot of the people that stuck around were really well versed at what we called the internal culture navigation, which is basically like playing the game or playing politics a little bit. It was more than that. It's more than that. I don't mean to dumb it down like that, but there was a definite pattern of people that were able to position themselves successfully internally to senior leaders to position themselves internally closer to how the company made money, and there's a bunch of other factors that we determined. And since then, we presented that information back to the client that hired us all the way almost a decade ago. And they said, "This is great, but we want you to just make a PowerPoint training on corporate culture or our company culture." And that was a little bit of a letdown, but the information didn't die with me. And about 3 months later, I took everything that we learned from that project and hosted my first course on Udemy, which at the time was brand new to the market. And since then, I've had 55,000 people worldwide take my courses on how they can navigate leadership and management development and be able to get themselves a promotion. So it's been a really fun ride.
No, that's good. I'm particularly happy to hear about how you help people to move forward in their career because this is what this career is all about. What this episode is
Yep.
podcast is all about. I'm also passionate about helping people to move forward in their career.
Yep.
So I'm going to ask, what are some mistakes that you find professionals that they are making when aiming for promotion? What are those things that you think they don't know?
Sure. I think the most common one is that you do not have to wait for your company's review cycle to start the process. And in fact, the first thing I do whenever I meet with anybody is tell them that, we should start yesterday because it is it's on average around 6 to 9 month process for you to make the right moves and start your campaign and get up to that level of getting at least a salary increase, if not a promotion. So the number one thing is that you don't wait until annual review cycle because if you're starting during the annual review cycle, it's going to be too late.
Yeah.
Um, that's the number one piece of feedback that I always give to anybody that's looking at that. And then the second most thing is that you deserve it. You don't have to you don't have to convince like you shouldn't walk into this thinking that you're doing anything wrong by the company. And a lot of people enter this process with a little bit of guilt. They come into the process not thinking that they deserve it or that they're asking for too much or that the company will come back and fire them because they're selfishly asking for more money, which is just not true on a multitude of reasons. And I can guarantee that pretty much everybody listening to this podcast, you're underpaid. I've done the research. I have lots of, I know that almost everybody that I speak to is likely underpaid because that's just how the world works a little bit. So go out there and go ask for it, and you deserve it because you're a contributor, and you can have the confidence that you earn the right to be there. So those are the top two things that I notice and give the most feedback on.
No, that's good, Nate. So, in terms of career growth, I think, in my opinion, there are two parts. or maybe multiple paths. Internal growth, whereby you stay with the same company and get to the next step, or people can consider moving out of that company, going to another company. Hopefully, they can get an upward role whereby
Hmm.
they move forward in their career. Now, in terms of strategy, are there some differences that people need to take note when planning, whether it's internal growth or external career move?
Yeah, definitely. And in fact, of the people that I've helped, I take an annual survey of them and try to keep up to speed on how that very question of, how has upward mobility been internally? Have you changed organizations, and why, and what was the result of that? And I will say that I know that there's kind of a sweet spot if you stay within an organization, if you're looking for upward mobility, to be there for longer than a year, but less than 4 years. Because at 4 years, there's diminishing returns in terms of how far you can go in your organization. I don't know why. I haven't really understood why that's the case, but there's a lot of statistic significance to the people that at least reply to my survey that after 4 years they hit a wall and they kind of stagnate. And that could be for a number of reasons. That could be they've gotten to a level of seniority, either manager or director, and you're kind of there for a while, or it just could be because there aren't opportunities available. But there is something in that time frame that if you're after 1 year and you're within 4 years, then that's the prime time for you to get in a promotion. The most significant increase in salary I've seen from internal mobility is a 20% increase in salary. So if you're looking through your finances and you're trying to make a decision on how much you want to increase and all that stuff, if you're looking for something larger than a 20% increase, then it's likely not going to be coming from an internal move. You likely want to go to an external move where you can level up. And like you mentioned, there's a lot of an advantage to seeking external opportunities because you can kind of use that to take the next step up. Maybe you're a senior contributor and you're ready to become a manager or whatever. It all just depends on the job market for your specific role. I in fact do a lot of I call it the state of your role report for my clients, where I take into consideration their geographic location, their role, the company that they've been at, and try to understand within your area, are you in demand? Is there a lot of people that are doing your role? And there's a lot of different factors that kind of weigh into it. But another thing that like kind of helps you in your case, if you are at an organization that's relatively smaller and you're one of the only contributors in your type of role, that's a lot of there's a lot of you have a lot of sort of like momentum on your side to help you get to that next level because you're the only one there, so you can help drive yourself forward. So there's tons of different factors that are in play, but those are the usual things that I look at, whether I'm helping somebody either consider moving upwards and starting the campaign internally or looking externally for jobs.
I like that. And I do know this that to move up, most of the time, you have to stand out.
Yep. Yep.
And sometimes you may be competing with other individual contributors. So, what do you tell an individual contributor in terms of what they need to do in order to stand out in a crowded workplace? Maybe they have multiple people doing the
Yep.
same thing. How can they stand out?
Yep. Yeah, for sure. So the first thing I usually tell people is every week you should be dedicating 30 minutes at the end of your week to fill out what I call the CARA method, which is current activities, responsibilities, and where you've gone above and beyond, because no one else is doing it for you. So if you're a contributor, you need to document those things week over week, project by project, so that you have a clear lineage of the contributions that you're making, just as a minimum. So if anybody listening to this wants one thing that they should be doing, that's the one thing that you should be doing. I learned that years ago when I was a junior consultant, and it was the biggest change in my career contributed to, or attributed to that. And then the next thing is there is a lot of ways to stand out. The biggest things that I like to help people um, with at their organization is there's a lot to be said about starting a club internally or leading a club internally to help you stand out. There's a lot to be said around coming up with an idea and advocating for it, whether you're in a product or project role, or if you're in an engineering role, or some type of idea that will help move your organization in the right direction or your business unit in the right direction, because that'll help you stand out and you can advocate for it. And then that becomes the thing that you kind of hang your hat on when it comes time for you to talk about the reasons why you should get promoted. Is that, hey, that one idea that we had that we're now working on, that was my idea and I'm helping to push the organization forward. So there's lots of other ways. Like, everyone also should be engaging. Like, if you want to get a promotion or if you want to stand out, then there's opportunities for you to get involved on the social side. Like, there's usually happy hours that you can go and meet with some other people. Like, you're going to have to play the game a little bit to get to where you want to go, but there's also those other things of, like, you can start a club. It maybe takes you an hour every month to prepare and then host the club, and then from that, everybody in the organization remembers your name, remembers the club, and that's a good thing to have. So there's lots of different ways to stand out, but those are usually the most popular ones that I help people think of.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. I was looking for strategies to advocate for oneself, but I think you mentioned it as part of your response to the previous question. So I'm now that we are talking about career, upward mobility in career, I want to ask you, what are some common career barrier that you've seen, and how do you help your clients to overcome these barriers?
Sure. I think, like you mentioned, there's internal barriers and there's external ones. So internal barriers, a lot of people that I speak to feel lack of confidence in their approach. They know they want something different or something higher or to grow, but they struggle with certain aspects of the confidence. So I spend a lot of time talking about their fulfillment and what makes them happy, and where they can draw confidence from, so that they can do the things that make them feel good, and then make them feel confident. So that's a big internal obstacle that I a lot of times I face, is that sometimes they don't feel like they deserve it. But we work on that in multiple different ways. The external things, usually, and this is just how I've seen it work, is that it's all a game of perception internally. If you're trying to get promoted, it's all a game of how you're perceived. So if I have a client, and this happened semi recently with one of my clients, that is on paper delivering everything perfectly, but externally is viewed as something somewhat negative, then we need to go understand her ecosystem of the people that are around her and her stakeholders, her line managers, and other people, and understand what are they being measured against, what is their perception of her or my client, and try to get a sense of what is the internal perception that you're battling against, and then therefore we can be more prescriptive around the things that you need to do differently to appear better. So, for example, one of my clients was having difficulty, though everything she was doing everything on time and contributing to meetings on time. The feedback that was received was that she was not interested in her role, or potentially apathetic towards her role. So that's a very big thing for us to change, and a perception that we need to change to, okay, now she's leading discussions, thought leadership discussions. She's contributing more actively on public communication channels. There's a lot of different things that she's doing now, and it's starting to change the tide. She just got had discussions with some senior leaders, and things are going well now, versus before, where people thought that she might not be that interested in staying, or contributing at the company. So it all depends on where you are, and the type of dynamic that you have internally, but there's lots of different strategies for all.
So, Nate, I like the fact that you mentioned perception, because really I think it's critical. Someone may be out there delivering their best efforts in terms of getting things done. But
Hmm.
if people have some kind of negative perception about them, it's going to be difficult for them to get that promotion and move forward in their career. Now, two things. How can you know other people's perception about you? Do you just go to them and ask them, oh, what do you think about my performance? Maybe it's like a feedback loop. You go to your direct manager or other leaders and get that feedback from them. Maybe that's the way. Or, and if you get this perception from them, and if it's negative, if it's something that you don't want, how do you change it?
Yep. Yep. So to answer the first part of the question, the how you get feedback, I think it's great to go in and ask directly. Like that should always be something that you should be doing, is asking for direct feedback. Most of the time, line managers aren't very comfortable with communications. Like line managers are just as struggling as the individual contributors, but for totally different reasons. They're not nearly equipped enough to handle helping people get promoted, or developing their careers. But aside from that, you might get a knee-jerk response answer of saying, "Oh yeah, you're doing great," and like nothing really substantial behind it. But then when it comes time to annual review season, it's like, you met expectations, or you're below expectations, and it's a little bit difficult to connect the dotted lines there. So, but I do recommend asking for direct feedback. I also do recommend asking for feedback of the people that you contribute with that aren't necessarily your line manager, saying, "Hey, for the next few weeks, I would really like it if you could give me some feedback on my performance. Would you mind if I set up some 15 minutes every other week where we can talk about the meetings that we were on together and what you thought worked well and what you thought didn't work well, and where I can improve." And that's, a lot of people are willing to do that if you ask them simply like that, and that'll help you a lot to to understand the perception of how you are perceived to others. And those are two really good ways. And then to change the narrative, there's a lot of different approaches that you can take there. And again, it's very dependent upon the type of manager that you have. So when I work with clients a lot, I tell them to get a read on their manager, in a way that we want to understand, what are your manager's motivations? What are they measured against? How do they communicate to your team? How do they communicate when they're under pressure? How do they communicate to you directly in one-on-ones versus to you directly in a public setting? And that usually paints a clear picture of the type of person that you're working with, and how you can interact with them. And that is, there's a lot of different approaches on how you can change the perception there, but usually it involves being slightly more involved in certain activities, or contributing in a different way. There's lots of different solves for it, but the most important thing is to be as prescriptive as possible about what the problem really is.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. So, obviously, there are occasions when an employee, they've done everything that they are expected to do. They are contributing at the best results, I'll say. But somehow they still get passed over for promotion. How do you, uh, what advice would you give such individual contributor if they get passed over for a promotion?
Yep, I would, for somebody that keeps getting passed over, it's definitely a breakdown in communication with your line manager, the person that you report to, and because your line manager is the person that has to advocate for you. So that's where the problem is. And what I would say is, have you explicitly stated that you want a promotion? Have you explicitly told your line that, hey, I'm actively seeking to grow within the organization. Can you help me get promoted? Have you had that conversation yet? Because if you haven't, you should start right now. The second thing is if you have had that conversation and it was met with sort of wishy-washy or non-committal answers or feedback from your line, then you want to understand where the non-commitment stems from. And then it goes back to, how are you positioned to best support your how are you positioned to best support your organization, and how are you positioned against your managers, um the metrics that they're measured against. To give you an example, I had a client and he was a part of a really good team, high performing team, but his team didn't have a whole lot of impact on his managers metrics. So when a team came time for promotions, he consistently would want to go and talk, and the manager really didn't have the time of day, because while his team was good, it was more of like a keep the lights on situation versus actively contributing to the strategic initiatives. So what we thought of doing was, coming up again, here's the novel idea or new concept, new strategic focus, so that he could actively contribute to something that his manager cared about, so that he came back upon the priority list and came back upon the, hey, this person is relevant to me and my initiative, so I can get your backup on the high level. So it does depend on a lot of different things, which I don't want that to be the knee jerk reaction, but it's all about how you can position yourself to actively making a contribution. And a lot of times it doesn't really mean a whole lot of anything, any new work. It's more of repositioning the work that you're already doing.
Good. So you've talked a lot about your different clients. You've shared different perspective, insights with us. I want to hear a success story of someone who used the step manager to advance in their career.
Yeah, sure. One of my more recent clients, she first came to me and said, "Hey, I think I'm underpaid," and I said, "Probably." And within the first couple meetings that we had, we determined that she was for sure underpaid, and I advocated for her to go in and say, hey, you can handle this really directly. All you have to do is just go and ask for, this is where you're at. This is where you think your contributions are. But she struggled a little bit with how that, she wasn't necessarily confident in that approach. So we started to unpack, like, what are the reasons why you are looking for more compensation. Obviously everybody wants more money. Like that's not an issue. Like that's pretty standard. But we started to unpack, like, kind of what aspects of her professional life she was trying to get more involved in, and how she wanted to grow and develop. And through that, we got an opportunity internally at her current organization for her to be a part of, or she got an opportunity to be a part of a new project, which we talked about, and she dove at that opportunity, and since then she's been crushing it at that opportunity, and doing really well with her other tasks. And just last week, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, she finally said, hey, you know what, I feel like I'm contributing at a high level, and I just got off the phone with my line manager, and she said it was, I've been doing really good work, and that she's very thankful for me. And I think the time is right for me now to go in and ask for the raise and the promotion. And she went and did, and she got, a solid 15, I think it was like 16% after all said and done. So it was really, she had all of the characteristics there, but it was more of like, let's work through this together so that you can recognize your contributions, and so you can recognize where you're doing really good work. And she ended up getting a really sizable increase in her salary, and is feeling pretty good about it. So we had a session today to catch up, and she's doing well.
Oh, that's awesome. So as we are wrapping it, Nate, we are now in rapid fire questions.
Sure.
So for you, your first job ever, what is it?
Oh man, my first job ever. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the fast food chain of Sonic,
Oh,
but I was a Sonic car hop, and you can't tell from here, but I'm really tall. I'm like 6 feet 4 inches. So me on top of skates is
uh,
is enormous. Yeah, that was my first job.
okay, that's good. Sonic, I know Sonic very well. So one book that changed your perspective on career or leadership.
Man, there's a lot of them. One, I think, Switch, How to Change When Change is Hard is a really good book by the Heat Brothers. And then I just got finished reading The Cold Start Problem, which is a really good book as well. That one's more geared towards like startups and entrepreneurship, but they're both really good.
So, what's your biggest career lesson that you learned the hard way?
Yes. I think the biggest lesson I continue to learn is that it is all about perception. I learned the hard way in the sense that my perception at an early job had eroded in some way, and though my contributions were pretty much the same, the perception eroded, and you do need to be mindful of that, and you need to be mindful of where others are seeing you and how you're coming into to playing the game every day. So perception is reality, and that's the biggest lesson that I've learned.
So, Nate, if you weren't running the step manager, what would you be doing?
Now I'd be doing I have a bunch of stuff all the time, but I love to build products. I love to build new organizations. I like to help people get from 0 to 1. So I'd probably be helping people get their dreams built in some way.
So, promotion or pay raise, which excites you the more?
So I would probably say pay raise because usually people are underpaid. Promotion's great, don't get me wrong, but everyone's underpaid, so everyone deserves a pay raise.
Okay, so what's in your opinion, the most underrated skill in the workplace?
Um, Generic answer would probably be communication. If you can effectively communicate yourself to others, is that's effective communicators go really far.
Okay. What's a quote that you really like that you want to share with us?
Sure, it's those who fear being conquered are sure of defeat,
Mm,
which is an abridged version of Napoleon Bonaparte's quote. And just to me, it's like if you think you're going to fail, if you're fearful of failing, then you've already lost. So go into it, go bold, and don't go into it thinking you're going to fail. So that's what a quote that I've always stuck with me for my entire life.
I like it. Finally, where can they find you? Connect with you so that they can be a part of your journey.
Sure. They can find me at thestepmanager.com or on social media, Nate Dinet, TSM. So you can find me that way. One of the two. If you
All
just
right.
Google my name, something will come up and you'll find me.
Awesome. It's good to have you, Nate. Enjoy this episode, and I'm sure my listeners they are going to find it very insightful. Thank you for joining us.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me.